Flight attendant humiliates black woman. What happens next leaves everyone stunned. Boarding a flight should be a simple routine, but for one passenger, it became an unforgettable turning point. What begins as an act of discrimination unfolds into a tale of resilience and power that shakes the very foundations of the airline industry. Today, we unravel the story of Lana Carter, a woman whose dignity and grace turned humiliation into a remarkable victory. As the cabin tension grew, no one on board could have predicted the storm brewing behind her calm demeanor. If you believe in justice, resilience, and the power of transformation, don't miss out on more stories like this. Hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you the stories that matter most. Now, let's dive into this incredible journey.
Lana Carter boarded the plane as other passengers bustled around her, but she moved with calm intention. Each step she took seemed to shift the atmosphere, as though the plane itself adjusted to her commanding presence. Her tailored navy suit was sleek and understated, yet it exuded an air of importance, as if she'd just come from negotiating with global leaders. Her natural curls framed her glowing brown skin, and her face, though resolute, carried an approachable warmth. At her age, Lana embodied the kind of seasoned elegance and unshakable confidence that could only be forged through overcoming life's storms. Passengers seated in first class took notice. Magazines were set aside, and laptops were paused mid-typing. A distinguished man in a middle seat glanced up, his expression shifting between intrigue and respect. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "She looks like the CEO of a big corporation," came the hushed reply, tinged with admiration. Lana remained unfazed, not because she was unaware of the murmurs, but because she had long since stopped letting such opinions affect her. She approached her window seat, where sunlight spilled through the glass, illuminating the space. Setting her bespoke black leather bag neatly into the overhead compartment, Lana took her seat with practiced grace. Her posture was impeccable as she opened a leather-bound notebook, beginning a ritual she performed before every flight, not to idle away the time, but to plan. For Lana, no moment was wasted. Her pen moved deliberately across the pages, each word a strategic piece of the larger vision she was crafting. As she wrote, she felt eyes on her. A short distance away, Clara Scott stood still in the aisle, observing passengers settle in. Her heels shifted slightly on the carpeted floor as her gaze lingered on Lana. There was something about this woman, Lana Carter. Clara couldn't quite define what she felt. As a lead flight attendant with more than 10 years of experience, she was no stranger to rubbing shoulders with prominent personalities, politicians, tycoons, celebrities. Yet there was something about this particular passenger that felt out of place. She didn't quite match the usual profile of someone in first class. Clara didn't voice her observation, but it quietly gnawed at her. Lana carried herself with a confidence that was undeniable, but not flashy. The way she moved suggested a sense of ownership over her surroundings, yet it lacked any trace of arrogance. It was a peculiar contrast that Clara couldn't easily reconcile. The feeling unsettled her. Clara couldn't pinpoint why Lana didn't seem to fit in with the typical first-class crowd, but the thought stuck. Maybe it was an unexamined prejudice, something she hadn't confronted before. Taking a calming breath, Clara straightened her uniform scarf and approached Lana's seat with her professional smile firmly in place. "May I see your ticket, please?" she asked politely. Lana, absorbed in her writing, glanced up, her sharp but kind eyes meeting Clara's. "Of course," she said, reaching for her bag and pulling out her electronic ticket. Clara leaned closer to verify it. Everything was in order. First class, seat 1A, Lana Carter. But she hesitated, holding the ticket a moment longer than necessary, as if waiting for something to feel wrong. "Thank you," she said finally, returning it with a smile that didn't entirely reach her eyes. "You're welcome," Lana replied softly, resuming her writing. Clara stood there briefly, unsure why she felt so uneasy. She glanced around the cabin, finding reassurance in the familiarity of the other passengers. Lana, however, remained an anomaly. Finally, Clara walked away, though her thoughts stayed fixated. She's different. She doesn't belong. Clara didn't realize that this thought was the first step toward a serious misstep. Meanwhile, Lana sat undisturbed, jotting notes in her leather-bound journal, immersed in her carefully planned ideas. Even as the occasional curious glance landed her way, she remained poised and unaffected. Without needing to look up, Lana sensed someone near. "Excuse me, ma'am, may I see your ticket?" The voice, professional but slightly tense, prompted Lana to glance up at Clara Scott, the senior attendant, whose smile looked practiced yet strained. "Of course," Lana said calmly, setting her pen aside and handing over her ticket. Clara scanned it carefully. First class, seat 1A, Lana Carter. Everything was correct. Still, Clara hesitated, as though searching for a mistake. The ticket remained in her hands for a few extra seconds before she finally returned it. Lana responded with a polite nod and went back to her writing, but Clara lingered, her unease unshaken. She glanced around the cabin, seeking familiarity among the regulars, yet Lana stood out in stark contrast. With a final fleeting look, Clara walked away, though one thought continued to echo in her mind. Clara eventually handed the ticket back without another word and stepped away. Lana slid the ticket into her bag and turned her attention back to her notebook, pen moving smoothly across the page. To her, the interaction felt insignificant, hardly worth a second thought. Yet Clara lingered nearby, pausing to exchange hurried words with a fellow flight attendant. Her gaze flitted toward Lana now and then, unease flickering across her expression. Something tugged at Clara's thoughts, and before long she returned to Lana's seat. "Ms. Carter, I need to speak with you again," she said, her tone stripped of the earlier pleasantries. Lana set her pen aside and met Clara's eyes with a calm but questioning look. "Is there an issue?" she asked, her voice steady. Clara leaned in slightly, her words firm, despite being spoken softly. "There's been a system error. I'm very sorry, but we'll need to relocate you to the economy cabin while we sort this out." Lana's piercing gaze stayed fixed on Clara. Calmly, she closed her notebook, her posture collected. "I don't understand," she said. "I reserved this seat weeks ago, and my ticket is valid. Can you explain what the problem is?" Clara hesitated for a moment, then replied evenly. "Unfortunately, I don't have further details right now. This is just a temporary measure, and I ask for your cooperation." The atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew tense. Curious passengers began to glance over, their quiet murmurs adding to the charged silence. Lana remained seated, her unwavering eyes locked on Clara's face. Although no one said it aloud, the unspoken tension of discrimination hung heavily in the air. Lana's voice, low but commanding, broke the quiet. "Are you certain about this?" she asked. Clara nodded, clasping her hands tightly in front of her. "Yes, I am. I must ask for your understanding. If you refuse, I'll have to involve security." Her words landed like a sharp edge, slicing through the quiet. Lana stayed still for a moment, before rising gracefully from her seat, her movements deliberate and composed. She didn't argue or protest further. Instead, she reached for the overhead compartment, retrieving her bag with steady hands. The other passengers watched her closely, some with quiet sympathy, others avoiding her gaze altogether. Lana remained impassive as she stepped into the aisle, exuding an unspoken strength that needed no words. As she entered the economy cabin, the change was stark. The space felt tighter, noisier, with harsh fluorescent lights amplifying the contrast. Clara escorted Lana to a middle seat near the back of the plane. Nearby, a man wrestled with an overhead bin while another shifted awkwardly to make space. Lana slid her bag under the seat and settled in, buckling her seatbelt with practiced calm. A woman sitting nearby leaned over, her voice hushed but tinged with indignation. "Why did they move you? What's going on?" Lana offered a small, sardonic smile, her tone light but edged with sharpness. "It's just a temporary adjustment," she said, her words clipped. Pulling out her phone, she scrolled through her contacts and began typing a short message, her expression unreadable as she continued to maintain her quiet composure. "There's a situation. Get ready." Sliding her phone back into her purse, Lana sank into her seat, her eyes locked on the view outside the window. She stayed silent, but her mind was already piecing together a new strategy. Up in first class, Clara resumed her tasks, relieved the problem seemed to be handled. Yet, beneath her calm facade, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. What Clara didn't grasp was that as Lana buckled her seatbelt in the rear cabin, the real conflict was just beginning. Returning to first class, Clara's expression grew tighter, her steps quicker, and her eyes darted across the passengers as if searching for support. No one paid her any mind. Some were asleep, others lost in work or scrolling their screens. Lana Carter remained in her seat, composed and seemingly unaffected by the growing tension around her. Clara stopped directly in front of her, dropping all pretense of courtesy. "Miss Carter," she said, her tone sharp and clipped, "you need to move to the economy cabin. There's been an error with the seating chart." Lana lifted her eyes from her notebook, her steady gaze meeting Clara's. "An error?" Lana's voice was calm, with a hint of doubt. "I booked this seat well in advance. If there's an issue, I don't think it's mine to resolve." "You need to vacate the seat now," Clara said, fists clenched. "We don't have time for debate." "If you refuse, I'll call security to handle this," she added, her voice rising just enough to catch the attention of nearby passengers. A woman seated nearby glanced up, her face a mix of confusion and unease as her eyes moved between Clara and Lana. Lana sat up straighter, closed her notebook, and placed it neatly on the tray table. "Are you really escalating this because I'm in the seat I paid for? Security? Fine, bring them. But I'm not sure that's your best course of action." Clara's face turned red, feeling challenged in front of the entire first-class section. She wasn't used to being defied, especially in her uniform, which represented authority. "I'm responsible for the comfort of all passengers," Clara said, her tone colder as she tried to reassert control. "And with that responsibility," Lana said, her voice icy and measured, "comes the need to treat passengers with respect. Maybe it's time you rethink your approach." Lana's words hit like a dagger, and for a moment, Clara was at a loss for a response. Her frustration boiled over. "If you don't cooperate this instant, you'll leave me no choice," Clara snapped. Lana sighed, calmly gathering her belongings with deliberate slowness before standing. As she stepped into the aisle, Clara blocked her path. "Move faster," Clara barked, her tone tense. "We can't inconvenience everyone else because of you." Lana stood tall, her steady gaze cutting through Clara's anger. "I am cooperating," Lana replied softly but firmly, her voice carrying enough weight for the entire cabin to hear. "But this isn't about the other passengers. It's about your bias." The word bias hit Clara like a shockwave, her composure shattering in an instant. She felt the weight of every gaze pressing down on her, amplifying her frustration. "Don't you dare raise your voice at me," Clara hissed, her voice trembling with barely contained anger. "I'm the one in control here, not you." Lana's lips curled into a faint smirk, her icy eyes shining with resolve. "Do you think you can avoid the fallout from this? Go ahead, give it your best shot." The taunt hit its mark. In a flash of reckless fury, Clara lashed out, kicking Lana's bag. It hit the floor with a sharp thud that cut through the silence of the cabin. The noise startled everyone. A few passengers gasped, while others sat frozen, all eyes locked on the escalating tension. The air inside the cabin became dense with an uneasy stillness. Lana bent down slowly, picking up her bag with careful precision, as though every motion was deliberate and controlled. When she stood, her eyes locked onto Clara's, freezing her in place. "What do you think you just did?" Lana asked, in a low, deliberate tone that carried a weight far greater than its volume. Clara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She searched for words, but nothing could excuse her outburst. Nearby, a man in his 50s rose to his feet, his voice sharp and accusatory. "Is this how passengers are treated? Is this what your airline calls professional conduct? Unbelievable." The murmur of discontent spread among the passengers as their expressions turned visibly angry. The air filled with hushed voices of outrage. Lana said nothing, her silence more powerful than words. Her eyes lingered on Clara one last time, leaving an unspoken message hanging in the air before she turned and walked down the aisle, her head held high. The tension remained, thick and oppressive, long after she was gone. Clara stood rooted in place, her face pale and her hands shaking. The passengers' accusing stares cut into her. But what haunted her most was Lana's calm, steady gaze, a gaze that would stay with her long after this moment had passed. Lana entered the crowded economy cabin, her posture tall and unshaken despite the humiliation she had endured. Her composure was unyielding, and her every step seemed to assert her unwavering dignity. The cramped, bustling cabin was a stark contrast to the serene comfort of first class. Lana had been assigned the middle seat in the center row, the least desirable spot in the section, a decision Clara had no doubt made, deliberately. Lana slid her handbag under the seat in front of her and sat down with practiced grace, her movements unhurried and deliberate. Passengers nearby glanced at her curiously. Some had overheard fragments of the first-class incident, their intrigue evident. A young woman sitting by the window stole repeated glances at Lana, clearly wanting to ask her something but hesitating to break the silence. Lana sat upright, radiating an air of calm authority that seemed to fill the cramped cabin. Though no one knew her story, it was clear she wasn't just another traveler. Meanwhile, back in first class, Clara stood in the galley, her hands trembling and her confidence visibly shaken. Clara thought she'd done all she could to maintain her authority, yet Lana's calm, unwavering stare, paired with her resolute silence, left her shaken to the core. Ethan approached, his eyes sharp and unwavering. "What did you just do?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with command. Clara turned, struggling to keep her poise. "I was doing my job. That passenger wasn't cooperating." Ethan arched a brow. "Not cooperating? Or are you just upset that she didn't fear you?" Clara broke eye contact, her voice tight. "I'm not having this conversation right now." Ethan wasn't letting up. "Oh, really? Do you think kicking her bag was part of your job? You think this will just blow over?" Clara didn't answer, her hands trembling as she busied herself with rearranging cups on a tray. The intercom phone rang suddenly, cutting through the tension. Ethan grabbed it, his eyes still fixed on her. "It's the operations office," he said grimly. Clara paused before taking the receiver. "This is Clara," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. A cold, authoritative voice responded. "Miss Scott, this is the operations team. A formal complaint has been filed, directly connected to senior management. We need your full report as soon as the flight lands." The words felt like a blow, leaving Clara stunned. "Understood," she managed to say, though her voice trembled. "One more thing," the voice added. "Any action you take moving forward will be monitored and reported." The line went dead, and Clara stood frozen, the phone heavy in her hand. Ethan crossed his arms, his expression firm. "I warned you, Clara. You've crossed a line, and now it's out of your hands." In the economy cabin, Lana quietly retrieved her phone, typing a quick message. "Everything is set. Keep a close eye." She slipped the phone back into her bag and turned to look out the window, her gaze distant but calculating. A young flight attendant, Clara, approached hesitantly with a glass of water. "Ma'am, is there anything I can do for you? You seem unsettled." Lana looked up, offering a faint, genuine smile. "Thank you, Clara, I'm fine." "Well, if you need anything, just let me know," Clara replied. Lana nodded, her soft voice carrying an air of quiet strength that left Clara intrigued. As she walked away, Clara glanced back at Lana, sensing there was more to her than met the eye. Nearby, a middle-aged man leaned toward Lana. "Are you okay? Things seemed tense up there in first class." Lana turned to him, her gaze sharp but composed. "I'm doing well. Sometimes the most unexpected hurdles open doors to incredible possibilities," Lana said calmly, her voice steady. The man gave a slow, understanding nod, as though her words resonated with him. "You have an impressive sense of calm. I respect that," he remarked. Lana responded with a faint smile and opened her notebook. With measured intent, she began writing, each pen stroke deliberate, as though shaping the framework of a well-calculated plan. Meanwhile, in the first-class section, Clara struggled to keep her composure. Her attention drifted toward the economy cabin where Lana sat, a creeping sense of anxiety clouding her thoughts. "She's biding her time," Ethan muttered, stepping closer. Clara turned toward him, a shadow of apprehension in her eyes. "Waiting for what?" she asked. Ethan shrugged with a knowing look. "Waiting to watch you ruin yourself." His words sent a cold shiver through her, striking a nerve. Clara didn't know what awaited her after landing, but one thing was certain: Lana Carter wasn't to be underestimated. The intercom chimed, announcing the plane's descent. The cabin buzzed with passengers gathering their belongings, their conversations a gentle hum. Lana remained still, leaning back in her seat, her gaze locked on the window. The expanse of the blue sky seemed to stretch endlessly, serene and unyielding, an ironic counterpoint to the turbulence stirring below. As the clouds drifted past, Lana sat motionless, her thoughts clear. She knew this landing marked not an end, but the start of something far more critical. In the galley at the front of the plane, Clara gripped the counter with white-knuckled intensity. The earlier call from operations echoed relentlessly in her mind, the warning sharp and unforgiving. Miss Carter is not someone to cross. She exhaled deeply, trying to steady her shaking hands, but the unease lingered like a shadow. Facing Lana once they landed filled her with dread. Ethan entered the galley, casting a brief glance her way, as though considering what to say, but he stopped short, sighing instead. Years of working together made Ethan sensitive to Clara's shifts in demeanor, and today her usual confidence was gone. "If you think this ends when the plane lands, you're mistaken," he said in a hushed tone, his words heavy with implication. Clara turned slightly but said nothing. Ethan continued, "You should talk to her. At least try to make this right." Clara shook her head, avoiding his gaze. "No," she replied flatly. "I've already gone too far. There's nothing I can say to fix it now." Ethan didn't push further, but his expression revealed his disappointment. He knew she was running from the repercussions of her choices, unable to face the fallout. The plane touched down with a soft jolt, its engines humming as it taxied to the gate. The intercom reminded passengers to remain seated, their seatbelts secured. Lana casually picked up her phone and typed a short message. "Landed. Proceed as planned." Sliding the phone back into her purse, she leaned back with a calm detachment. Around her, the cabin filled with motion as passengers stood, readying themselves to disembark. Lana stayed put, unbothered by the commotion. She knew everything was unfolding exactly as she intended. She scanned the cabin, noticing the occasional curious or uneasy glance in her direction. It didn't bother her. Clara, busy with a final check of the rose arrangements, paused beside Lana's seat. "Ma'am, would you like help with your luggage?" Clara asked politely. Lana looked up, her lips curving into a subtle smile. Thank you, Clara, but I've got it handled. You've done a great job on this flight. Clara smiled back, her cheeks tinged with pink. Thank you, Mum. Please let me know if there's anything else you need. Lana nodded. I'll keep that in mind. As Clara walked away, she found herself glancing back, unable to shake the feeling that there was something remarkable about this woman. It wasn't just Lana's calm demeanor. It was an effortless authority that left Clara both intrigued and uneasy. Up in first class, Clara stood by the exit, prepared to thank each passenger as they disembarked. Her hands trembled slightly at the thought of seeing Lana again. If she could just stay composed, perhaps it wouldn't be so bad. Still, Lana's quiet presence during the flight had felt ominous, like the calm before a storm. Passengers exited one by one, offering quick smiles or nods as they passed Clara. Then Lana appeared, walking with measured steps, her calm yet commanding presence undeniable. Clara's heart raced as Lana approached. Forcing a smile, Clara greeted her. Thank you for flying with us, Ms. Carter. Lana paused, her gaze steady and piercing. There was no anger in her eyes, but the quiet intensity made Clara feel exposed. I'm sure we'll meet again, Lana said softly, her tone carrying a subtle weight of warning. She moved past Clara, leaving her rooted to the spot, her legs heavy as lead. Once inside the terminal, the bustling crowd and hum of activity enveloped Lana, but she remained composed. A man in a crisp black suit quickly approached, exuding professionalism. Welcome, Ms. Carter. Your car is ready, he said. Thank you, Lana replied with a slight nod. Before following him, she retrieved her phone and sent a brief message. They'll contact her soon. Prepare a full report. With that, she slipped the phone back into her purse and strode confidently toward the exit, leaving behind what felt like the beginning of something significant. On board the plane, Clara remained frozen, her gaze fixed on the open door. Ethan appeared, his expression firm but devoid of empathy. She didn't need to raise her voice or make a scene, he said, his tone even. But I think you know what's coming. Clara didn't reply, only managing a slight nod. The realization settled over her like a heavy cloud. She had crossed a line, and the consequences were inescapable. As the plane doors finally closed, Clara shuffled back to the galley, slumping into a chair with her face buried in her hands. All she could do was wait for the reckoning she knew was inevitable. At the airline's headquarters, sunlight streamed through the glass walls of the top-floor meeting room. Despite the brightness of the morning, the tension in the room was palpable. The leadership team, including CEO William Hale and the department heads for customer service, HR, and communications, gathered around a sprawling conference table. Stacks of reports about the recent flight incident cluttered their spaces. Lana Carter's name stood out on nearly every page, not only as a first-class passenger, but also as a significant shareholder in the airline. Her grievance extended far beyond a bad experience. It exposed critical weaknesses in the airline's customer service protocols and overall culture. William Hale, his silver hair contrasting with his intense, focused expression, slammed the report shut with a sharp thud that echoed in the room. He surveyed the room with a deliberate gaze. The issue isn't just what happened with Lana Carter, he began, his tone slicing through the silence. The problem is the way we handled a VIP, one of our biggest investors, with shocking incompetence. This is unacceptable. His voice carried authority, leaving no room for argument. Across the table, the customer service director straightened in his chair, looking resolute. We've gone over the situation thoroughly, he said. Miss Carter's first-class ticket was valid, and the decision to move her to economy was made by Chief Flight Attendant Clara Scott without sufficient justification. It was a clear violation of our service standards. William's brow furrowed deeply. Why would Clara make such a choice? He asked. The HR director cleared his throat and pulled another report from the pile. We believe it may have been an unconscious bias, he replied carefully. Regardless of intent, the impact on our reputation is undeniable. William echoed the word, his tone heavy. He turned to the communications director. How's the media handling this? The young director, composed and professional, replied. So far, Ms. Carter's complaint hasn't gone public, but we're on borrowed time. One leak and social media could explode. William exhaled sharply. Draft an action plan, now. At the airport, Clara Scott sat alone in her cramped office. The glow of her laptop illuminated an email from HR, summoning her to an emergency meeting with the executive team. Her fingers quivered as she reread the message. She braced herself for what she knew would be an interrogation. Just then, Ethan walked in, his expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. They've called you in, haven't they? He asked softly. Clara nodded, unable to speak. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You made a mistake, he said gently. But if you're upfront about it and own up, maybe they'll give you another shot. Clara's voice barely rose above a whisper. I know I messed up, Ethan, but a simple apology won't fix this. Ethan nodded. It's true. An apology won't undo what happened, but it's a step in the right direction. Gathering herself, Clara adjusted her uniform and left the room, each step feeling like a march toward Judgment Day. In the boardroom, Clara found herself at the far end of the long table, her uniform pristine, but her confidence shaken. The air was thick with tension as the executive team fixed their eyes on her, waiting for answers. The weight of their expectations pressed down on her, each second of silence stretching into an eternity. William approached Ms. Carter, a first-class passenger, and asked her to relocate to economy. Clara bowed her head, her voice shaking with emotion. I reviewed her ticket. It was legitimate, yet something about her didn't seem to fit in that seat. The room grew uncomfortably quiet. The phrase, didn't fit, lingered in the air like a heavy storm cloud, causing an uneasy tension. Didn't fit, William repeated, his tone calm but edged with firmness. Could you clarify that? Clara's voice barely rose above a whisper as she confessed, I have no valid reason. She admitted, it was an unconscious bias on my part. I made a grave error in judgment, and I fully own that mistake. William observed her in silence, his gaze sharp, searching for sincerity in her words. Do you realize the significant harm your actions have inflicted on the airline's reputation? He finally asked. Clara nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I do. And I'm deeply sorry, she replied, her voice trembling. William turned to the HR director. Ms. Scott is to be suspended immediately, he directed. In addition, I want unconscious bias training rolled out company-wide within 2 weeks. This will show that we stand firmly against all forms of inequity. Meanwhile, Lana sat in her office, engaged in a virtual meeting with her legal team. The screen displayed the company's report, outlining reforms to their service policies and their new bias training initiative. So far, their response has been constructive, a lawyer commented. They're requesting an in-person meeting to discuss the next steps. Lana nodded, her expression unflinching. We'll closely monitor their actions, she said. This isn't about issuing a hollow apology. Real changes must be made. As the meeting ended, Lana turned toward the window, sunlight pouring into her office. There was no sense of triumph or personal achievement in her expression. For her, this wasn't a win. It was a minor step in the larger struggle against systemic injustice. Picking up her phone, she typed a quick message. Keep tracking their progress. Ensure we stay on course. She set the phone down, leaning back in her chair. Outside, the world continued its rhythm, but Lana knew that even the smallest adjustments today could yield profound impacts tomorrow. Sunlight bathed the airline headquarters conference room as the attendees gathered, the weight of the moment palpable in the air. This wasn't just about resolving an isolated incident. It was an opportunity to reshape the organization's culture. Lana Carter entered the room with an air of calm authority that immediately drew attention. Without raising her voice, her presence demanded respect. Across the table sat William Hale, the airline's CEO, flanked by his senior leadership team. Rising to greet her, William extended his hand. "Welcome, Ms. Carter," he said. "Thank you for joining us. I believe this meeting signifies an important step forward." Lana met his handshake with a composed nod. "I certainly hope so," she replied. William took his seat, his expression firm and unyielding. "Let's address this directly," he began. "First, I want to express my deepest apologies. The recent incident on the flight was completely unacceptable. We've already begun taking action. Lead flight attendant Clara Scott has been suspended, and we're drafting a comprehensive overhaul of our customer service policies." Lana, however, maintained her composure, her sharp eyes locked on William. "This isn't about a single individual, Mr. Hale," she said, her tone icy. "This is about a broken system. If I weren't a major shareholder or someone with influence, would this even be on your radar? What about the countless others whose voices go unheard?" William nodded, his hands clasped on the table. "You're absolutely correct. The issue runs deeper than individual actions. It's systemic. That's why we're introducing mandatory bias awareness and customer service training for all employees and creating an independent oversight committee to ensure these reforms are enforced." Lana leaned back, her brow raised. "Words and promises won't cut it," she countered. "I want concrete action with clear timelines and real accountability. Without strict oversight, all of this remains nothing more than empty rhetoric." William gestured to his assistant, who handed him a file. He placed it in front of Lana. "Here is the detailed plan we've developed. I hope you'll review it and offer your insights." Lana picked up the document, her eyes scanning the pages with laser focus. "I'll review it," she said flatly. "But let me be clear, I won't tolerate delays. Real change isn't written on paper, it's demonstrated through action." William dipped his head slightly, his tone respectful. "I understand, and we value your continued input throughout this process." Meanwhile, across town, Clara Scott sat alone in her modest apartment, her suspension notice on the table next to a handwritten apology letter she had rewritten countless times. She knew the letter couldn't erase the past, but it was a step toward owning her actions. Taking a deep breath, she opened her laptop and entered Lana Carter's email address. Her hand trembled as she hovered over the send button. With a heavy sigh, Clara hit send, slumping back into her chair. A mix of emotions swirled within her: relief, fear, and regret. A few days later, Lana opened Clara's email. She read each word with care. The letter was unflinchingly honest. Clara took full responsibility without making excuses. "Ms. Carter," it read, "I don't ask for forgiveness. I only want you to know I've learned a painful lesson and am determined not to repeat this mistake. Thank you for holding me accountable." Lana set her laptop down and leaned back, her thoughts heavy. Not everyone has the courage to confront their failures, she realized. Sometimes, genuine remorse is the first step toward meaningful transformation. Over the following months, the airline implemented its new training program across the organization. Employees attended sessions focused on bias awareness, conflict resolution, and empathetic customer service. These weren't just superficial changes. They represented a real shift in the company's culture. Passengers began sharing uplifting stories about their experiences during flights, highlighting how well they were treated. Positive feedback quickly spread across social media platforms, helping the airline rebuild its image. Clara, the young flight attendant who had assisted Lana in the economy class, earned a promotion to cabin manager. In an internal interview, Clara reflected, "Even the smallest actions can create a ripple effect. That's something I learned from Ms. Carter. She taught me the value of fairness and inspired me to keep pushing forward." One cool morning, Lana sat in her office, reviewing the company's progress report. The reform goals were steadily being met, with encouraging updates coming in regularly. Her phone lit up with a message from William Hale. "Thank you for keeping us on course. These changes will serve as a lasting foundation, not just a short-term fix." Lana smiled and typed back, "Remember, sustaining progress is just as crucial. I'll keep overseeing the process." She set her phone aside and looked out the window at the bright, clear sky. What unfolded on that flight wasn't simply a disagreement between a crew member and a passenger. It was a powerful lesson about respect, fairness, and how one individual's stand against injustice can catalyze transformation across an entire organization. Lana understood that the road to change is endless, but she felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing she had sparked a meaningful difference not just for herself, but for many others. She smiled softly, feeling like the horizon was clearer and more expansive than ever. That pivotal flight was more than just a conflict. It became a profound statement about human dignity, equity, and the bravery to confront structural issues. Lana Carter demonstrated that dignity cannot be silenced by bias or authority. Her composed determination reminds us all that in the face of hardship, there's always a way to transform challenges into opportunities, not only for oneself, but for the greater good.
In the end, Lana Carter's unshakable resolve became a catalyst for change, proving that dignity and courage can triumph even in the face of injustice. Her actions not only redefined her journey, but also paved the way for a better future for countless others. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Join us for more powerful tales that remind us of the strength within us all. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.